But have you ever seen alien lingerie, human? The virgin alien girl said, and the question hung in the air, thick as the sulfur and heat. Jax was on his knees, wrists bound behind him with something that felt like cooled magma, but flexed like steel. The floor was obsidian, polished smooth and reflecting the hellish orange glow of a lava river flowing behind a wall of crystal. His head throbbed. One minute he was salvaging a derelict freighter on a forgotten moon. The next he was the main event in some kind of alien grotto. He looked up, tracing the lines of his captor. She was tall, impossibly lean, with skin the color of a pale blue gas flame. Long, bone-white hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face of sharp, arrogant beauty. Her eyes were molten gold, and they were fixed on him with an unnerving mix of clinical curiosity and raw hunger. "Look, lady," Jax rasped, his throat dry. "Whatever you think I did, I didn't. I'm just a scavenger. I pick up junk. I sell junk. End of story." She tilted her head, a slow, predatory movement. Her voice was a low hum, like a powerful engine idling. "You trespassed on a sacred proving ground during a celestial alignment. The junk you were picking up was a consecrated relic. Ignorance is not a shield here, human." She paced before him, her bare feet silent on the black stone. She wore something that was less clothing and more weaponized ornament. Black leather straps, plates of the same dark metal that bound him, and not a whole lot else. It left very little of her toned blue form to the imagination. "So what? You sacrifice trespassers to your lava god? A little cliché, don't you think?" Sarcasm was his only weapon, and he wielded it like a rusty blade. Her lips, a shade darker than her skin, curved into a smirk. "We are not so primitive. Sacrifice is inefficient. We prefer a trial, a test of worth. It determines if you are fit to serve or fit only to be rendered into component resources." Component resources. Fucking charming. Jax tested his bonds. No give. "I'm not interested in your job fair, sweetheart. Just let me go and I'll forget I ever saw this volcanic shithole." She stopped in front of him and held up a hand. From the shadows, another of her kind, slighter, more timid, brought forth a carved obsidian box. She dismissed the servant with a flick of her fingers and opened it. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a web of gossamer filaments. They shimmered with their own internal pulsing light, a soft cyan glow. "Your trial requires you wear the catheli, the conduit." Jack stared at the glowing web. It looked delicate, beautiful, and profoundly alien. It was shaped vaguely like a harness, meant to cover the torso. "That's your alien lingerie?" The word slipped out, laced with disbelief. "You drag me in here, tie me up, and want me to play dress-up?" Her golden eyes narrowed. "Lingerie. A curious term. This is not for seduction. It is a tool of judgment. It attunes the wearer's biosignature to the sacred field of this moon. It will connect you to me. Every pulse of your heart, every surge of fear, every lie you consider, I will feel it." She lifted the filaments from the box. They drifted like smoke. "And then I will judge if you are worthy." "Yeah, hard pass," Jack said, leaning back as far as his bonds would allow. "I don't let anyone in my head, especially not a blue-skinned dominatrix with a god complex." A flash of anger crossed her face, the first genuine emotion he'd seen. She was on him in an instant, her strength shocking. One hand clamped around his jaw, forcing his head still. Her face was inches from his. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin. "You have no choice. My name is Zyla. I am the first daughter of the Zancoran dynasty. This is my ascension trial, and you are its catalyst. You will wear the conduit. You will face me in the arena, and you will either submit with honor or be broken. Now, which will it be?" He smelled ozone and something wild, like desert rain on hot stone. Her grip was unbreakable, his heart hammered against his ribs. He was fucked. Absolutely, royally fucked. But if he was going down, he was going down swinging. Or in this case, sneering. "Fine," he spat. "But if I get a rash, you're paying for the fucking cream." Zyla's lips tightened, but she didn't release him. The term rash was unfamiliar, but the defiance in his tone was crystal clear. "Your species has a strange fixation on trivial bodily discomforts in the face of annihilation." She finally let go of his jaw, and he sucked in a sharp breath, the imprint of her fingers tingling on his skin. The Cathali will not harm you, unless you resist its attunement. Then the process can be unpleasant. She held the shimmering web up. The arena awaits. My honor and your life depend on what happens next. You think this is a game. You think your sarcasm is a shield. Here, in the heart of my world, it is just noise. The only things that matter are strength, will, and submission. Jax watched her, a cold knot tightening in his gut. This wasn't some random pirate abduction. This was ritual. It was serious, and she was deadly serious. He'd run into cults before, but they were usually disorganized fanatics high on space dust. Zyla was something else entirely. She moved with the coiled grace of a predator, her every word weighted with absolute authority. So, what's the win condition here? He asked, shifting his weight. I kick your ass, I get my ship back and a 5-star review on Abductions Monthly. Her laugh was a short, sharp bark. You will not kick my ass, human. Your goal is not to win. Your goal is to prove you are not worthless. You will face me. You will try to land a single blow. If you can impress me with your struggle, show me a spark of a warrior's spirit before you are inevitably overwhelmed, you will be granted a life of servitude. It is a high honor. A life of servitude. Wow, you really know how to sell it. The benefits package must be amazing. He pulled at his bonds again, a futile, angry gesture. And if I don't impress you? Then you will be broken, she repeated, her voice dropping to a flat, chilling tone. Your body will fuel the forges, and your name will be forgotten before the next cycle. Those are the rules. She stepped closer, the glowing conduit held between her hands. It is time. Remove your upper garment. Jack stared at her. You want me to take my shirt off? In here? After you just threatened to turn me into charcoal briquettes? Lady, you gotta buy a guy a drink first. A flicker of confusion crossed her features. A drink? This is not a negotiation, nor is it a mating proposal. The conduit must have direct contact with the skin over your heart and spine. This was it. The line. He could keep mouthing off and get killed, or he could play along and maybe find a way out of this mess. Survival instincts warred with his pride. Survival won, but just barely. Fine, he grumbled. It was awkward, trying to shrug out of his worn utility jacket and synth cotton shirt with his hands tied, but he managed it, contorting until the clothes lay pooled around his waist. The air was hot on his bare skin, but a chill ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. He was covered in old scars, a few from bad bar fights, one long one from a shrapnel tear on Cygnus X1, and the faint web-like pattern of a neuro-shock whip on his back. They were a map of his shitty life. Zyla's golden eyes traced the marks, her expression unreadable. She didn't comment, but he felt exposed, stripped bare in a way that had nothing to do with being shirtless. She brought the conduit forward. The filaments felt like touching static electricity and ice at the same time. Do not fight it, she commanded, her voice soft but absolute. He flinched as she laid it against his chest. A violent shudder racked his body. It was a cold, invasive fire, seeping into his skin, his nerves. It felt like 1,000 tiny needles sinking into him. Not painful, but deeply, fundamentally wrong. He gritted his teeth, a low growl escaping his throat. The filaments crawled over his shoulders and down his back, wrapping around his torso and locking into place with a faint click. Then the coldness vanished, replaced by a low, constant hum that seemed to vibrate directly in his bones. A soft cyan light now pulsed from the pattern on his chest, matching the rhythm of his racing heart. What the fuck? He breathed, the words barely a whisper. It is done, Zyla said, stepping back. She was watching him intently. The attunement is complete. I can feel you, Jax. Her using his name sent another jolt through him. I feel your anger, your fear, and a deep, profound loneliness. Her voice was softer now, less commanding, more curious. You are a paradox human. So much noise on the surface, but a hollow silence underneath. Jax's breath hitched. Her words hit too close. A sniper shot in the dark. He hated it. Hated the way she looked at him like she was reading the source code of his soul. The conduit on his skin was a constant, intimate presence, a low thrum that connected him to her. He could feel a faint echo in the back of his mind, a sense of her own coiled spring stillness, her absolute self-assurance. It was a one-way connection, for now, but it was unnerving as hell. "Get out of my head," he snarled, forcing bravado back into his voice. "You wanted me to wear the goddamn glow-in-the-dark harness, I wore it. Now what? You want me to do a little dance for you?" Zyla's expression hardened again, the brief moment of softness gone. "Now, you prove you deserve to live." She turned and strode towards a massive stone gate at the far end of the chamber. It ground open with a deafening roar, revealing a vast arena under a bruised purple sky. Twin moons hung in the heavens, one a shattered wreck, the other a perfect silver orb. The arena floor was black sand, and the stands, carved from the mountainside, were filled with her people, thousands of them, all silent, all watching. "Welcome to the proving of the first daughter," she announced, her voice echoing in the sudden vast space. "This is where your noise dies, and your spirit speaks." She didn't wait for him. She walked out into the center of the arena, a lone, blue-skinned figure under the alien sky. The crowd remained utterly silent, a sea of expectant faces. Two guards, clad in the same black metal as Zyla, approached Jax. They cut his bonds with a sharp hiss of energy blades and shoved him forward. "The rules are simple," one of them grunted in heavily accented galactic standard. "You face the first daughter. You may use any of the trial weapons from the rack. You must land one clean blow upon her. Succeed, and you are claimed. Fail, and you are forfeit." Jax rubbed his wrists, the circulation returning in a painful flood of pins and needles. He glanced at the weapon rack. It held a variety of brutal-looking alien blades, staffs, and things that defied easy description. They were all designed for someone with Zyla's reach and strength, not his. This wasn't a trial. It was a public execution with extra steps. He felt a surge of her confidence through the conduit, a calm, predatory certainty. She knew she would win. The arrogance pissed him off more than the threat. Fine. If he was going to die, he was going to wipe that smug look off her face first. He ignored the ornate blades and picked up a simple, heavy metal staff about his own height. It was blunt, ugly, and functional, just like him. He walked out onto the black sand. The silence of the crowd, a physical weight. Zyla stood waiting, unarmed. A flicker of surprise crossed her face as he chose the staff. He could feel it through the link, a brief spike of interest. "A simple weapon for a simple creature," she called out, her voice carrying across the sand. "Appropriate." "Yeah, well, I'm a simple guy," Jax called back, giving the staff a few practice swings. It was well balanced. "I see a problem, I hit it with a big stick." Her lips curved. "Then come, human. Show me your spirit." This was his first awkward sexual misunderstanding. In his culture, that phrase, spoken with that look, was a clear invitation. Sarcasm took over. "You sure you're ready for all this spirit? It's a lot to handle. Might get you all flustered." A ripple went through the crowd. Not laughter, but a collective sharp intake of breath. Zyla's golden eyes blazed. He felt a wave of pure, cold fury from her through the conduit. Oh shit, he'd misread that one. Badly. "You dare," she hissed, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You dare speak the words of mating challenge in my ascension arena. You think this is a jest?" Before he could process what mating challenge meant, she moved. She wasn't just fast, she was instantaneous. One moment she was 20 yards away, the next she was on him, her hand chopping down at his neck. Jax reacted on pure instinct. Years of bar brawls and dodging blaster fire had honed his reflexes to a razor's edge. He threw the staff up just in time to block her chop. The impact shuddered up his arms, a bone-jarring force that nearly buckled his knees. He hadn't just misspoken, he'd fundamentally changed the game. The silent crowd erupted into a low, rhythmic chant. The air crackled with new energy. "What the hell are you talking about?" he grunted, shoving her back and scrambling for footing on the loose sand. "I made a joke." "There are no jokes in the sacred tongue," she snarled, lunging again. She was unarmed, but she didn't need to be. Her hands were blurs, her feet a whirlwind of kicks aimed at his joints, his ribs, his head. He was purely on the defensive, using the staff to block, parry, and desperately keep her at bay. He was bigger, probably stronger in a straight deadlift, but she was a whirlwind of controlled violence. Every move was precise, economical, and deadly. He could feel her rage through the conduit, a cold, focused fire. But underneath it there was something else. A current of excitement. The challenge, the unexpected audacity of his words, had ignited something in her. The trial was no longer a formality. It was real now. He spun, blocking a kick that would have shattered his knee, and used the momentum to swing the staff in a wide arc at her head. She ducked under it with fluid grace, the end of the staff whistling through the air where her neck had been. She came up inside his guard, her palm striking his chest right over the heart of the conduit. It wasn't a powerful blow, but an energy discharge like a high-powered stunner, arced from her hand into the alien lingerie. Pain exploded behind his eyes. His nervous system lit up like a faulty switchboard, and he collapsed, muscles spasming. The conduit on his skin flared with a brilliant, blinding light. He lay on the black sand, gasping for air, every nerve ending screaming. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the crowd's chant grow louder. Zyla stood over him, her chest heaving slightly, her golden eyes burning with an intensity that was more than just anger. It was possession. "You invoked the right of carnal dominion," she said, her voice low and resonant. "You have challenged me not for survival, but for my body, my bloodline, my very essence. The rules of the trial are now void. This is no longer about submission. This is about conquest." She knelt beside him, one hand pressing down on his chest, right over the pulsing conduit. The connection between them blazed, no longer a faint echo but a roaring inferno. He could feel her triumph, her arousal, her shock at his own stubborn refusal to break. He was a puzzle she was suddenly desperate to solve. "I didn't," he wheezed, trying to push himself up, but his muscles wouldn't obey. "Then it was your spirit speaking a truth your mouth was too cowardly to admit," she countered. Her fingers traced the glowing filaments on his skin. The touch was electric, sending another wave of involuntary tremors through him. "You wanted to know the win condition, human. You have just found it. One of us will claim the other. Body and soul. Here before my people. The victor will lead them. The vanquished will be the victor's property. Forever." He stared up at her, at the raw hunger in her eyes, and understood. This wasn't about servitude anymore. This wasn't about being turned into charcoal. He had stumbled into the highest possible stakes her culture had to offer. He had accidentally challenged a warrior princess to a fuck or be fucked duel for the throne. "Shit," he breathed. The single word summed up the totality of his existence at that moment. She leaned closer, her long white hair brushing against his cheek. Her voice was a husky whisper meant only for him. "Pray to whatever gods you have, Jax, because I have never been so eager to break someone." The world tilted on its axis. One moment Jax was fighting for his life, the next for his very soul. And then the sky tore open. A screaming whine ripped through the air, drowning out the crowd's chant. A ship, sleek and black as a shark's eye, blasted through the thin atmosphere, its engines flaring. It was a mercenary vessel, a Cutlass-class raider. Ugly, fast, and built for one thing: smash-and-grab operations. Blaster fire, hot green bolts of it, stitched across the arena sands, kicking up plumes of black glass. Panic erupted in the stands. Zyla's people, so stoic and silent moments before, scattered in terror. The guards, caught completely off guard, tried to form a defensive line, but they were cut down in seconds. Zyla was on her feet instantly, her fury now directed at the sky. "Traitors!" she roared, her voice laced with venom. "The elders dare use off-world scum to interfere?" More figures repelled from the belly of the raider, landing on the sand with practiced ease. They were heavily armed, their armor a mismatch of scavenged military gear. Xeno-mercenaries. The worst kind. Jax scrambled to his feet, his body still trembling from her stun strike, but adrenaline was a potent cure. "Friends of yours?" he yelled over the chaos. "My uncles!" she spat, her eyes scanning the attackers, identifying their leader. "He would rather see our dynasty burn than let a daughter who follows the old rites take the throne." A blaster bolt hit the sand near her feet. She didn't even flinch. Jax, however, hit the deck. "Great family reunion. Can we RSVP no?" He rolled, grabbing his staff. The mercenaries were advancing, forming a pincer. They weren't trying to kill the crowd. Their target was Zyla, and him, by extension, the guy with the glowing thing on his chest standing right next to her. A mercenary raised his rifle, aiming for Zyla's back. "Down!" Jax yelled. He didn't think. He reacted. He surged forward, tackling her hard around the waist. They went down in a tangle of limbs, the blaster bolt searing the air where her head had been. They landed with a grunt, his body half covering hers. The conduit flared again, but this time it wasn't from her attack. It was from their proximity, the sudden, violent intimacy. For a split second through the link he felt her shock, her surprise at his action, and a confusing flicker of gratitude. "You saved me," she breathed, her golden eyes wide. "Don't get used to it," he grunted, pushing himself off her. "They want you dead. I just happened to be in the splash zone." He got to his feet, staff held ready. "What's the plan, princess? Your mating challenge is officially on hold due to asshole relatives." For the first time, he saw a sliver of uncertainty in her. The ritual, the arena, that was her world. This, chaotic, unpredictable violence, was his. Their roles were reversing. She was a duelist. He was a survivor. "The catacombs," she said, her authority returning. "Beneath the arena, we can lose them in the lava tubes." Two mercenaries broke from the main group, charging them. Zyla moved to meet one, her movements a fluid, deadly dance even without a weapon. She dodged a clumsy swing of a vibro axe and countered with a series of precise strikes to the merc's throat and joints. He went down with a wet gurgle. Jax met the other one. The merc was a big Catharan, all tusks and muscle. He swung his rifle like a club. Jax ducked, the stock whistling past his ear, and slammed the end of his staff into the back of the Catharan's knee. The leg buckled with a sickening crack. As the merc fell, Jax brought the staff down hard on the back of his helmeted head. The merc slumped, unconscious. Jax and Zyla stood back to back for a moment, breathing heavily. The fight had become a strange, brutal ballet. He'd anticipate an attack from her blind spot, and she'd move to cover his. The conduit between them was no longer a tool of interrogation. It was a combat link, feeding them echoes of each other's intent. "This way," she yelled, grabbing his arm. Her grip was iron, but it wasn't the grip of a captor anymore. It was the grip of an ally. They sprinted across the sand toward a low, unassuming archway at the edge of the arena as blaster fire chewed up the ground behind them. They plunged into the darkness of the catacombs, the sounds of battle fading behind them, replaced by the drip of water and the deep, resonant hum of the planet's core. The only light came from the faint orange glow of distant lava flows, filtering through cracks in the rock and the steady cyan pulse of the conduit on Jax's chest. The air was thick and hot, smelling of sulfur and wet stone. "Great," Jax panted, leaning against a rock wall to catch his breath. "From a public execution to a goddamn cave crawl. My day just keeps getting better." Zyla didn't respond. She was listening, her head tilted, her body tense. The warrior was back in full force, but the aftermath of the fight lingered between them. In the arena, she had been the master of a ritual he didn't understand. Down here, in the dark, they were just two people running for their lives. The power dynamic had been shattered. He looked at her, the faint light catching the sharp planes of her face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a grim focus. He could still feel her through the conduit, a mix of fury at her uncle's betrayal and a thrum of something else aimed at him. It wasn't anger. It was a confusing, powerful awareness. "They'll follow," she said finally, her voice low. "They know the main tunnels. We have to go deeper." She started moving again, navigating the labyrinthine passages with an innate certainty. He followed, the staff held ready. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a raw, frayed tension. The unresolved energy of the mating challenge hung in the air, amplified by their forced proximity and the life-or-death fight they'd just shared. They were crammed into a narrow passage when a tremor shook the ground, sending a shower of dust and pebbles from the ceiling. Zyla stumbled, and Jax instinctively reached out, his hand finding her waist to steady her. Her skin was hot to the touch. She froze, and he froze, his hand still on her. The conduit on his chest blazed, sending a jolt of pure sensation through him. He felt her sharp intake of breath as if it were his own, felt the sudden, frantic beat of her heart. It was too much, too intimate. He snatched his hand back like he'd been burned. "Sorry," he muttered. It is. The conduit, she said, her voice strained. She wouldn't look at him. It resonates with strong emotion. Physical contact amplifies it. Yeah, I got that, he said, his own voice rough. He could still feel the phantom heat of her on his palm. The memory of tackling her, of their bodies pressed together on the sand, flashed in his mind. They found a small side cavern, a dead-end pocket in the rock barely big enough for two people. A narrow fissure in the ceiling let in a dim, hellish red light from a lava tube far above. It was defensible, a place to rest. They sank to the floor, backs against opposite walls, the small space charged with unspoken words. The conduit pulsed softly between them, a silent third presence. The mating challenge, he said, breaking the silence. He had to know. What the hell was that, really? She finally looked at him, her golden eyes seeming to glow in the dim light. It is the oldest rite, a challenge of dominance. When our people were still tribal, it was how leadership was determined. A warrior could challenge a chieftain. If they won, they took everything, the title, the territory, the mate. And you brought it back. She nodded. The elders have grown corrupt, soft. They trade and politic while our strength withers. They fear the old ways, the ways that made us strong. She paused, her gaze dropping to the conduit on his chest. When a challenger speaks the words, the trial becomes absolute. There are only two outcomes, claiming or being claimed. And that involves, he prompted, though he was pretty sure he knew the answer. The victor proves their dominance over the vanquished, physically, completely. It is a consummation of the conquest. It forges a bond. Her voice was clinical, as if describing a biological process, but he felt the tremor of something else through their link. Nerves, inexperience. The virgin alien girl from the title. The realization hit him like a physical blow. For all her talk of dominance and conquest, she had never actually done this. The thought was destabilizing. It made her vulnerable. It made him feel something he didn't want to feel. He looked at the pulse of light on his own skin. He was marked, linked to this terrifying, powerful, and utterly clueless warrior princess. The heat in the cavern seemed to intensify. Or maybe it was just him. He saw the way she watched him, her eyes tracing the lines of his body. The hunter was back in her gaze, but it was a different kind of hunt now. The challenge still stands, she whispered, the sound seeming to shake the very air in the small space. The mercenaries interrupted, but they did not invalidate it. She pushed herself off the wall and crawled toward him across the dusty floor. The movement was slow, deliberate, a predator closing the distance. I felt your spirit in the arena, Jax. You fought. You protected me. You did not break. He stayed silent, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm that he knew she could feel. She stopped just before him, close enough that he could feel the heat of her body, smell that strange, intoxicating scent of ozone and rain. The rite must be completed, she murmured, her golden eyes locking onto his. You challenged me. Now, face the consequences. She reached out, her blue fingers lightly tracing the edge of the glowing conduit on his chest. His skin erupted in goosebumps. Claim me, human, she breathed, her voice a mix of command and plea. Or I will claim you. His mind went blank. Every sarcastic retort, every defensive instinct, evaporated in the face of her raw, terrifying sincerity. Her fingers on his chest were a brand, the conduit a blazing bridge between them. He could feel her resolve, a powerful current of ritualistic duty mixed with a deep, unnerving curiosity. But beneath it all, he felt the tremor of her inexperience, a vulnerability that was more potent than any threat. This wasn't just a power play for her. This was a leap into the unknown. Zyla, he started, his voice a dry rasp, but he didn't know what to say. Argue? Refuse? It felt useless. The challenge had been issued. The fight had been fought. This was the inevitable conclusion. She leaned in, her lips brushing his. It wasn't a kiss. It was a test, a question. He didn't answer. He couldn't. He was paralyzed by the intensity of the moment, by the feel of her cool lips against his, by the roaring inferno of sensation through their bond. Seeing his hesitation as weakness, or perhaps an invitation, She took control. She pushed him back against the rock wall, her body pressing his down. Her strength was effortless, her movements fluid and certain. One hand pinned his wrists above his head, her grip like steel. The other traced a line from the conduit on his chest down to the waistband of his pants. He was completely at her mercy. A part of him, the stubborn, defiant part, wanted to fight, to throw her off and prove he was no one's property. But another, deeper part of him was mesmerized. The sheer force of her will was an intoxicating thing. He had spent his life running, fighting, surviving on the fringes. No one had ever wanted him with this kind of all-consuming intensity. "You are silent," she whispered, her mouth close to his ear. "Does your spirit finally submit?" He could feel her pulse, a frantic, excited rhythm that echoed his own. He could feel her arousal, sharp and clear through the link, and her fear, a fragile thing hidden beneath layers of warrior pride. She was a virgin. This dominant, terrifying alien was as new to this as a Terran teenager. That single thought shattered his resistance. This wasn't a conquest. It was a mutual fall. "Fuck it," he breathed, the words a surrender. He went slack beneath her, a conscious act of submission, a signal. Her breath hitched. She felt the shift in him, the moment he yielded. Her control faltered for a second, her grip on his wrists loosening. In that instant he moved, not to fight but to change the dynamic. He twisted, using his weight to roll them over until he was on top, pinning her beneath him. He held her hands by her head, mirroring the way she had held him. Her eyes widened in shock, her body tensing. He saw a flash of fear, then a blaze of something else. Excitement. The challenge was back on. "My turn," he growled, his voice low and rough. He lowered his head, his mouth finding hers. This time, it was a kiss. Hard, deep, and demanding. He poured all his frustration, his fear, and his reluctant, burning attraction into it. It was a battle of wills, a clash of tongues and teeth. For a moment she fought him, and then, with a low groan that vibrated through them both, she melted, her body arching up against his. The conduit flared, bathing the small cavern in a brilliant, pulsating cyan light. It was no longer just his heartbeat it was synced to. It was theirs. It was a raw, desperate coupling in the dark, fueled by adrenaline and the strange, sacred rules of her culture. Clothes were torn away, discarded on the dusty floor. Her skin was hot and smooth beneath his hands, his own rough and scarred against hers. Every touch was electric, amplified 1,000 times by the conduit. He felt her pleasure as if it were his own, a sharp, stabbing wave that made his head spin. He felt her pain, a brief, sharp sting that he instinctively tried to soothe. From her point of view, the world dissolved into pure sensation. The human, Jax, was an anchor in a storm she hadn't known she was summoning. The rite was supposed to be about dominance, a clinical transfer of power. The sacred text spoke of submission and claiming. They did not speak of this chaotic, beautiful, terrifying sharing. She felt his history of loneliness, the deep ache of a life lived on the run. She felt his surprise at her own innocence, his gentleness when he discovered it. When he was inside her, the bond between them solidified, becoming a tangible thing, a cord of light and energy that seemed to weave their very souls together. It was more than the rite demanded. It was more than she had ever imagined. Climax was a supernova. The conduit blazed with a white-hot light so bright it forced them to shut their eyes. Sensation overloaded their nerves. Jax cried out, a raw, wordless sound. Zyla screamed his name. In that shared, blinding moment, something broke and something else was forged. As the light faded, they lay tangled together, slick with sweat, panting in the dim red glow of the cavern. The silence returned, but it was different now, heavier. He rolled off her, his body trembling with the aftershocks. He looked at his chest. The conduit was gone. In its place, tattooed on his skin in glowing cyan lines, was a permanent mark, an intricate pattern that mirrored the one on her forehead, a symbol he'd noticed but not understood. It was her family crest, a brand, a bond mark. "What?" he began, his voice hoarse. "What the fuck did you do to me?" Zyla pushed herself up on one elbow, looking at the mark on his chest. Her warrior's confidence was gone, replaced by a wide-eyed awe and a dawning horror. Her hand went to her own chest. over her heart. The right. It was not supposed to be like this, she whispered, her voice shaking. The bond. It is supposed to be symbolic, a mark of ownership. She looked at him, her golden eyes filled with a terrifying, profound emotion he couldn't name. But this, I feel you, Jax. I feel you in my soul. It is real. We are bound. The weight of her words crashed down on him. Bound. Not just claimed as property in some primitive ritual, but truly, fundamentally linked to her. The glowing mark on his chest was a permanent fixture, a constant reminder. It pulsed with a soft, steady light, a rhythm that was now his own. He felt a phantom echo of her shock and confusion in his own mind, a shared space where there was once only his own cynical thoughts. Unbind it, he said, his voice dangerously low. He sat up, ignoring his own nudity, his own exhaustion. All he could focus on was the alien sigil glowing on his skin. Whatever you did, undo it. Now. Zila shook her head, pulling her knees to her chest in a gesture that seemed impossibly small and vulnerable for the warrior who had dominated him moments before. I cannot. A bond forged during the true rite. It is permanent. The sacred texts described it as a legend, a myth from the time of the gods. They said it only happened when two spirits recognized each other as equals, as mates. Mates? He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Lady, 20 minutes ago you were going to turn me into a fireplace log. We are not mates. We're a captor and her prisoner who got into a situation that was way out of hand. Were you a prisoner when you tackled me away from the blaster fire? She asked softly, her gaze unwavering. Were you a prisoner when you fought beside me? He had no answer for that. He had acted on instinct, the same survival instinct that had kept him alive for a decade in the galaxy's shittiest corners. But it had been more than that. He hadn't just saved himself, he'd saved her, and he hated that he'd done it. He hated that she was right. This is a mistake, he said, scrubbing a hand over his face. A big, glowing, blue-skinned mistake. A distant sound echoed down the tunnels, shouting. The heavy tread of armored boots. The mercenaries. They were still hunting. The reality of their situation snapped back into focus. Shit, he swore, grabbing for his pants. They're closing in. Zila was on her feet in an instant, the warrior's mask slamming back into place. The moment of vulnerability was over. We need to move. Now, she commanded, pulling on her own tattered garments. The intimacy of the cavern was shattered, replaced by the grim necessity of survival. But something had irrevocably shifted. As they dressed in silence, he couldn't help but notice the new way she looked at him. The clinical curiosity was gone. The possessive fire was gone. In its place was a complicated mix of respect, confusion, and a startling degree of trust. She was no longer looking at a specimen or a conquest. She was looking at her partner. He took the lead this time, grabbing his staff. This way, he said, pointing down a narrow, unexplored tunnel. The main passages are a death trap. We need to go where they won't expect. She hesitated for only a second before nodding. Lead on. It was a massive concession of authority, and they both knew it. He was the scavenger, the expert at running and hiding in the forgotten corners of the universe. For the first time, she was following him. They moved quickly and quietly through the oppressive heat, Jax using his instincts to navigate the treacherous, unstable lava tubes. He could feel her presence behind him without looking, a steady, reassuring warmth at his back. The bond, as much as he hated it, had its uses. He could feel her alertness, a spike of warning whenever they passed a section of weak rock or a pocket of noxious gas. Your uncle, he said, breaking the silence as they paused in the shadow of a massive crystal formation. Why does he want you dead so badly? She stared into the glowing depths of the crystal. My father, the sovereign, is dying. Tradition dictates his firstborn succeeds him. But my uncle leads a faction of elders who believe a female cannot rule, especially not one who embraces the old ways. The rite of ascension was my claim. If I complete it by bringing a worthy consort before the people, my rule is undeniable. They would rather hire aliens to murder me in my own arena than see me on the throne. A worthy consort, Jax repeated, the glowing mark on his chest seeming to burn a little hotter. You mean me? Yes, she said simply. Your unexpected challenge elevated you from a mere trial subject to a potential consort, and our bonding sealed it. Whether we like it or not, our fates are now entwined with the fate of my people." He let out a long, slow breath. From junker to prince consort of some volcanic moon cult in the span of a few hours. His life was officially a fucking joke. "So, if we get out of this," he said, "I'm your ticket to the throne. And you," she countered, her golden eyes meeting his, "are my bonded mate. A position of immense power. You would be second only to me." He had to admit, king of the volcano people had a certain ring to it. It was better than scavenger scum. "Maybe. First, we have to get out of this," he said, his voice grim. "And I think I know how." He pointed with his staff towards a low, rumbling sound. "That's a primary lava conduit. If we can get to the control nexus for the flow regulators, we can give your uncle's mercs a welcome party they won't forget." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Zyla's face. It was the first time he'd seen her smile like that since the arena, but this time it was directed with him, not at him. "A flood of molten rock," she mused. "An honorable death for traitors. I like the way your mind works, human." The way she said human was different now. It wasn't an insult. It was almost, affectionate. He hated that he didn't hate it. They found the control nexus in a vast, cavernous chamber pulsing with geothermal energy. It was an ancient place. The technology a bizarre fusion of advanced engineering and raw geology. Massive crystal conduits channeled rivers of lava, their flow directed by colossal, resonating pillars that hummed with power. It was the heart of the moon's volcanic activity, and it was their best and only trap. Jax surveyed the setup, his scavenger's eye picking out the patterns. "Okay, it's a pressure release system," he said, more to himself than to her. "If we overload the resonance frequency on that central pillar, it should trigger a fail-safe purge. It'll dump the contents of every primary conduit right into the main access tunnels where the mercs are." "Can you do it?" Zyla asked, her gaze fixed on the entrance to the chamber, watching for any sign of pursuit. "Yeah, but I need to get to that master control interface," he said, pointing to a raised platform suspended over the central lava channel. "And I'll need a distraction, a big one." "I can be a big distraction," she said, a grim smile touching her lips. As if on cue, the mercenaries appeared, their helmet lights cutting through the gloom. There were at least a dozen of them, led by a hulking Zankaran male in ornate, dark armor. It had to be her uncle's champion. "Zyla!" the leader boomed, his voice distorted by his helmet speaker. "The elders have declared you forfeit. Surrender the Outworlder and accept your judgment." Zyla stepped forward into the light, her expression one of pure contempt. "Tell my uncle his cowardice stinks even from here, Kale. Sending foreign dogs to do his dirty work. He has no honor." While Kale's attention was on her, Jax slipped away into the shadows, making a wide circle towards the platform's access ladder. The bond between them was a taut line. He could feel her calculated calm, a tightly controlled rage she was using as a shield. She was drawing their fire, giving him the opening he needed. "Honor?" Kyle laughed. "Honor doesn't keep our trade routes open. Your primitive rituals will be the ruin of us. Now, step aside. We are here for the human. He is the key." Jax froze on the ladder. They were here for him? Zyla felt his shock through the link. "They think you are a prophecy figure." Her thought came through not as words, but as a pure concept, an instant download of information through their bond. An old legend. The star-fallen who will wear the first daughter's mark and reforge the dynasty. "My uncle thinks killing you will sever my claim. So much for being a worthless scavenger," he muttered under his breath, and started climbing faster. The fight began. Zyla was a whirlwind of blue-skinned fury. She'd picked up a long shard of obsidian and wielded it like a short sword, a blur of motion against the mercenaries' clumsy blaster fire. But she was outnumbered. Jax reached the platform. The interface was alien, but the principles of power regulation were universal. He got to work, his fingers flying across the glowing crystal controls, bypassing lockouts and rerouting energy. Below, Zyla took a hit. A blaster bolt grazed her side, and she cried out in pain. Jax felt a phantom sting in his own side, a white-hot agony that made him gasp. The bond, It shared everything. Rage, cold and pure, flooded him. He redoubled his efforts, his movements becoming frantic. He was no longer just trying to save himself. He was trying to save her. Almost there, he grunted, sweat pouring down his face. He slammed his palm down on the final rune. A klaxon began to blare, a deep, wailing sound. The central pillar glowed an angry red. "Zyla, get out of there, now!" he yelled. She dispatched one more merc with a brutal efficiency, and then sprinted for the platform ladder, Kale and the remaining soldiers hot on her heels. The ground began to shake violently. Massive gates in the conduit walls began to grind open. Rivers of incandescent lava began to pour into the main tunnels. Zyla scrambled up the ladder. Kyle was right behind her. He lunged, grabbing her ankle. She kicked back, her heel connecting with his helmet, but he held on. Jax looked down from the platform. He had no weapon but the staff he'd left at the base of the ladder. He saw a thick power cable running along the railing. An idea, stupid and desperate, sparked in his mind. He ripped the cable from its housing, raw energy arcing from the frayed end. As Zyla struggled against Kale's grip, Jax leaned over the edge. "Hey, asshole!" he yelled. Kale looked up, his faceplate reflecting the roaring lava. "Let her go!" Jax shouted, and swung the sparking cable down like a whip. It struck Kale square in the chest. The mercenary's armor wasn't insulated for that kind of direct energy surge. He convulsed, screaming, his grip on Zyla loosening. He fell, tumbling from the ladder into the rising tide of lava below. He vanished without a sound. Zyla scrambled the rest of the way onto the platform, collapsing next to Jax, clutching her wounded side. They watched as the lava flooded the chamber, consuming the last of the mercenaries. The klaxon died, leaving only the roar of the fire. They were safe. They were alive. He reached out, his hand hovering over her wound. "You okay?" "It is just a flesh wound," she said, but her voice was strained. She looked at him, her golden eyes searching his. "You saved me. Again. We're bonded, remember?" he said, the sarcasm a thin veil over the genuine emotion he was feeling. "Your problem is my problem now, I guess." He made a show of looking around the lava-filled cavern. "So, you think we could maybe blow this popsicle stand?" She stared at him, a deep frown of concentration on her face. "Popsicle stand?" she repeated, tasting the words. "Is that a ritual term? For a place of final victory and consummation?" Jax just stared at her, then threw his head back and laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "Yeah, princess," he said, shaking his head. "Something like that." The aftermath was quiet. The lava slowly receded, leaving behind a chamber coated in a fresh layer of glistening black rock. The immediate threat was gone, but the larger problem remained. They were bonded. He was the prophesied star fallen, and she was a claimant to a throne, currently bleeding from a blaster wound in a subterranean cave. It was a hell of a mess. Jax tore a strip of fabric from his already ruined shirt and gently pressed it against her side. "Hold that," he ordered. She winced but did as she was told, her eyes never leaving his face. The laughter had died, leaving a comfortable silence in its wake. The battle, the shared danger and the ridiculous misunderstanding had broken the last of the tension between them. "The way back to the main citadel will be clear now," she said. "Kyle's forces are neutralized. My own honor guard will be searching. They will find us." "And what happens then?" Jax asked, his voice serious. "You show up with me, your magical star-fallen boy toy with the glowing chest tattoo. Do they just hand you the crown?" "They will see the bond mark," she said, her hand covering his on her wound. "They will have no choice but to honor the ancient laws, the prophecy. They will challenge my uncle's faction. There may be a civil war." "Fucking fantastic," he sighed, slumping back against the rock wall. "Civil war. Just what I've always wanted to get in the middle of." He looked at her, at the way the dim light caught the determined set of her jaw, the exhaustion and pain she was trying to hide. He thought about his life before this, the empty ship, the cold rations, the constant looking over his shoulder. It was a free life, but it was a lonely one. Here, tied to this impossible alien woman, he had faced death, fought monsters, and felt more alive than he had in years. The bond mark on his chest pulsed gently. It didn't feel like a brand anymore. It felt like a part of him. There is another option, Zyla said, her voice barely a whisper. She wouldn't meet his eyes. The bond can be broken. Jax sat bolt upright. You told me it was permanent. A true bond is, but there is a ritual of renunciation. It would require me to forfeit my claim, my name, my honor. I would be exiled. The bond would be severed, but it would destroy the part of my spirit that is connected to it. It would leave me hollow, but you would be free. He stared at her, stunned into silence. She would give up everything, her throne, her people, her very essence, to set him free. The sheer weight of that sacrifice was staggering. It was the most noble, selfless thing anyone had ever offered him. He looked down at the glowing mark on his chest. He thought about walking away, back to his ship, back to his empty life. The thought left a cold, hollow feeling in his gut, a feeling that was terrifyingly familiar. It was the loneliness he'd carried for years. He reached out and gently tilted her chin up, forcing her to look at him. Her golden eyes were shimmering with unshed tears. The proud warrior princess was offering him her own destruction. Don't be a fucking idiot, he said softly. Her eyes widened. What? You heard me. Go through all this shit, win your crazy mating challenge, fulfill your goddamn prophecy, just to throw it all away. For me? A guy you met yesterday? That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her blue cheek. But you would not be free. You would be tied to me, to this world. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. He could feel the thrum of their bond, a deep, steady rhythm that felt less like a chain and more like an anchor. You know, he said, his voice a low murmur, I'm starting to think this alien lingerie looks good on me. A shaky laugh escaped her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. It is not lingerie, she whispered. It is the mark of a king consort. Whatever you want to call it, princess, he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Point is, you're stuck with me, and if your asshole relatives want a war, then we'll give them one. Her hand came up to cup his cheek, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. You are the strangest, most infuriating, and most honorable man I have ever met, Jax of the Stars. Yeah, well, he said, his smile turning into a cocky grin. You're not so bad yourself for a bossy, blue-skinned alien who tried to kill me. The sound of approaching footsteps and familiar Zankoran voices echoed from the tunnel. Her honor guard had found them. Zyla pulled back, her expression shifting. The vulnerability was tucked away, and the future queen looked out. She stood pulling him up with her. She faced the entrance, her head held high, her hand gripping his tightly. Their fingers interlaced. The bond mark on his chest and the crest on her forehead pulsed in perfect sync, a silent declaration to all who would see. The life he knew was over. The future was a terrifying, uncertain storm. But as he stood there, hand in hand with his warrior princess ready to face a civil war on a lava-drenched moon, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt like he was home,